And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day, another great week, I hope, in this greatest nation on God's green earth. It is the second week of the war. And the war is also threatening to become a war at home. There are indications about encrypted communications that originated in Iran that may serve as an operational trigger for sleeper assets outside the country and even here within the United States. Speaking of Iranian assets, what about Russian assets? The evidence is now undeniable that Russia is aiding Iran with intelligence material. And the president was asked about that, and the president refused to condemn Russia. It's amazing. When asked how Russia assisting Iran might impact the U.S.-Russia relationship, which has been better under President Trump, the president responded, they'd say we do it against them, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they say that we do it against them? This is a pattern for President Trump, which is excusing anything that Vladimir Putin takes on. We will get to that in the midst of questions about the war and what happens next. ABC is reporting that the U.S. has intercepted encrypted communications that would serve as that operational trigger for sleeper assets outside the country. This, according to a federal government alert sent to law enforcement agencies. The alert, which was reviewed by ABC News, cites preliminary signals analysis of a transmission likely of Iranian origin that was relayed across multiple countries shortly after the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, was killed in a U.S. and Israeli attack on February 28th. Meanwhile, CNN is reporting, the whole world is acknowledging, another U.S. soldier died after sustaining injuries during an attack last week on Saudi Arabia. This, according to the U.S. military, it brings the number of American troops killed in the Iran war to 7. Thank God it is not 700. Thank God it is not 7,000. It is a war, and the loss of 7 U.S. citizens, U.S. patriots, soldiers, that is horrible enough. The military on Monday identified the new service member identified as a casualty as Army Sergeant Benjamin Pennington, who's 26 years old, of Glendale, Kentucky. Pennington, who was injured at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, was assigned to the 1st Space Battalion, 1st Space Brigade, a unit within Army Space and Missile Defense Command. Meanwhile, speaking of command, the Dispatch is reporting, the whole world is acknowledging, that there is a new supreme leader in Iran. The supreme leader has the same last name as the last supreme leader. That last name is Khamenei. This is Mojtaba Khamenei. He's 56 years old, the son of Iran's slain former supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But Mojtaba, the son, has been named the country's new supreme leader by the Assembly of Experts. You think about that. Can you imagine if we were governed by an assembly of experts, what the public reaction would be? Which would be, I think, resentful. The idea that we have an assembly of experts, a body made up of Shiite clerics. So they have religious power, not just political power. The younger Khamenei, who's 56 years old, has never held an official position in the Iranian government, although he allegedly has close ties to the country's security services and has been sanctioned by the U.S. government for representing his father in an unofficial capacity. The choice is widely seen as a signal that the Islamic Republic intends to continue the hardline policies of the elder Khamenei. Haider al-Qasir, who is a member of the Assembly of Experts, told Iranian media that the selection had been made in accordance with the advice of former Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that Iran's next Supreme Leader be hated by the enemy. You always want a leader who's hated. That's the way it is going there. The idea that this new leader will represent a change. Meanwhile, The Hill reports that President Trump's declared refusal to sign any legislation until Congress passes a key bill that would add new voting requirements, the so-called SAVE Act, that is holding up any development or decision or new direction for the Congress of the United States. We will get to that and the president's insistence on blocking any kind of Republican initiative that doesn't include the passage of the SAVE Act. Why is this considered so important? It is becoming now the top legislative priority for the Republican Party. There is also a prominent Republican from the Hollywood community who is extremely angry about a number of things and is leaving the Republican Party. James Woods, the acclaimed and very skillful actor, is now a political operative who says he still thinks President Trump is the greatest president of all time, but he is leaving the Republican Party. We will get to that development. We will also be speaking to David Frum, has a piece in The Atlantic about decision-making and war policy, plus a report about getting high in high school. Dr. Kevin Sabet, who has been a crusader against the dangers of marijuana, particularly for young people, but really for everybody, now talks about a new suggestion that young students are actually using marijuana in high school and what should be done about it in our high school campuses. All kinds of challenges. And the new secret plan and long shot attempt by the Democrats to win a Senate seat in California. Okay, not by Democrats, but by Democrats to blow a Senate seat in California and hand that seat to Republicans. How would that possibly work? It has to do with there being so many Democrats who are running for that open Senate seat that they would be able to let the two Republicans out of 11 major candidates actually be at the top of the heap and make it into the general election from the primary. We will talk about that very unlikely but very earth-shaking possibility. That and the latest declarations from the Iranian foreign minister, who was actually on Meet the Press. Now, how does that work in the midst of the bombing and the difficulty? We will get to that. And then more Epstein files fallout with 40 famous names and high-profile exits. A look at how Jeffrey Epstein's network reached from Silicon Valley to the halls of Harvard and Buckingham Palace. All coming up on a busy edition right here of the Michael Medved Show. In the midst of war and with the insistence on both sides, both the American side and the Iranian side, that they won't negotiate. They won't negotiate an end to the war. How does the war end? We'll be talking to David Frum, former White House aide under President Bush. David Frum has his ideas of how the war could possibly end in a way that is very beneficial for the world and for the United States. We'll be speaking to him coming up. Meanwhile, President Trump is determined that nothing will happen in Congress because he won't sign any bills. He won't agree to any deals until the SAVE Act is passed. Okay, the Hill reports President Trump's declared refusal to sign any legislation until Congress passes a key bill that would add new voting requirements is putting new pressure on GOP leaders ahead of the midterm elections. It must be done immediately. It supersedes everything else, President Trump said in a post on Truth Social over the weekend about his cherished SAVE Act. And then he has in capital letters, must go to the front of the line. I, as president, will not sign anything, other bills at all, until this is passed. And not the watered-down version. Go for the gold. Must show voter ID and proof of citizenship. No mail-in ballots except for military, illness, disability, travel, he said. Now, the problem with that is there already are a majority of states, at least 30 of the 50 states, that have some form of mail-in ballots. And under the Constitution, states get to determine the rules for voting. And the idea that the American people who have gotten used to the convenience of mail-in ballots and being able to do it yourself, with all of the studies showing that there is very, very little and very rare evidence of voting fraud. The idea that President Trump is basically threatening to hold up the government or any decision by the government, even in the midst of a crucial, extremely significant war in which we are engaged. In the midst of all that, he wants to hold up everything for the SAVE Act. Trump's ultimatum is sure to be welcome news to many House Republicans, whom he will be speaking to today at a 3-day issues retreat in Miami. The party is set to map out its legislative agenda and to sharpen its messages for the midterm elections that are coming up in November. The president's post follows weeks of debate over the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility America Act. It's the Save America Act, SA, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, which passed the House last month but is awaiting a vote in the Senate. The legislation would require individuals to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote and some form of ID before casting a ballot. Now, the idea of requiring ID is not radical, and it is overwhelmingly popular and has public support even from a majority of Democrats. So on that one, there's no problem. But the idea that President Trump is also insisting on getting rid of all mail-in voting, the public sentiment is much more divided. The bill has almost universal support among Republicans. They report on the Hill in Congress, but Democrats are staunchly opposed and can use a filibuster to prevent the SAVE Act from advancing in the upper chamber, the Senate. That has led the president and some conservatives in Congress to push Senate Majority Leader John Thune, the Republican from South Dakota, to return the Senate to a talking filibuster that could allow them to move the bill forward. The talking filibuster, in other words, is a real filibuster where people actually speak. They don't just declare, well, we now have that 40% or more of the Senate that we need to stop everything. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal is reporting, and they have been leading the reporting on this, on new Epstein files fallout, 40 famous names and high-profile exits, a look at how Jeffrey Epstein's network reached from Silicon Valley to the halls of Harvard and Buckingham Palace. The release of the Epstein files has rippled through politics, business, and academics, revealing secret ties that many prominent people kept with Jeffrey Epstein. By the way, I'm not prominent enough to have had ever been in the same, I don't think I've ever been in the same building with Jeffrey Epstein, let alone in the same room or had anything to do with him, thank God. After their connections became public, many said they regretted associating with Epstein. Yeah, you think so? And some have stepped down from their roles, including Lawrence Summers, who was a former Treasury Secretary, former president of Harvard University, had been teaching at Harvard for years. He quit because he was close with Jeffrey Epstein. Meanwhile, on a completely different front, a plaque has been installed finally. And this is a plaque honoring the law enforcement officers who defended the Capitol building during the outrageous January 6, 2021 riot that has been installed after a 3-year delay. On behalf of a grateful Congress, this plaque honors the extraordinary individuals who bravely protected and defended this symbol of democracy. On January 6, 2021, the plaque reads, their heroism will never be forgotten. There were 140 law enforcement personnel who were hospitalized, who were seriously hurt on that day, which was not a day of patriotism and was not a day of love or for love of country. The installation of the Capitol building finally follows through on a law former President Biden signed in 2022 that ordered the plaque to be installed. We will be right back with more on the state of war coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, CBS is reporting that thousands of Iranians poured into the streets overnight to celebrate the selection of Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's new supreme leader, the son of the old supreme leader, following the killing of his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. One analyst told CBS News the younger Khamenei has now stepped into the highest risk job. His father was killed in the war, first hours of this war. So, according to reports, but nobody's sure about this, was a child of the new supreme leader, the mother of the new supreme leader, and maybe his wife. So he's unlikely to be much of a compromiser or someone who would take the rational course. It is obviously the rational course of surrender, which is what President Trump is demanding. And meanwhile, NBC News is reporting Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, has rejected calls for a ceasefire in the Middle East, telling NBC News, Meet the Press. He was on Meet the Press electronically. He didn't travel to New York or Washington, D.C. for that. But he told to Meet the Press that his country needs to continue fighting for the sake of our people. So what are they fighting for? They're fighting to defend this evil regime that just got a new jolt of energy by choosing a new supreme leader from this council of experts. He said the U.S. had already shattered the ceasefire reached to end last year's 12-day war in June of last year, adding, and now you want to ask for a ceasefire again? This doesn't work like this. On Friday, before the weekend, four sources told NBC News that Russia was providing intelligence to Iran on the location of U.S. forces in the Middle East, including intelligence that could help Iran to locate American warships and to attack them, and to attack any American bases or places where there would be U.S. personnel. Pressed on whether Iran is receiving Russian support, the foreign minister Araghchi said that cooperation between Iran and Russia is not something new. It's not secret. He did not say whether Russian intelligence was helping Iran locate U.S. military assets. Asked whether he considered Russia to have entered the conflict, the American ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, said, we know that both Russia and Iran have had symbiotic relationship there where they help one another. If they are providing anything, it certainly hasn't been very effective, said our UN ambassador, because the U.S. military is decimating Iran's Air Force, air defenses, Navy, ground forces, command and control. So whatever they're providing, if they're providing anything, hasn't shown to help the Iranians very much. On a Saturday, the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Iran would no longer attack neighboring Gulf nations unless they facilitate U.S. or Israeli attacks, and he apologized to the region after Iranian strikes killed people in Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman. The Iranian foreign minister also said that if the U.S. deploys ground troops in Iran, we have very brave soldiers who are waiting for any enemy who enters into our soil to fight with them and to kill them and destroy them. President Donald Trump said last week that one of the reasons for launching the war was that Iran would soon have missiles capable of reaching the U.S., but Araghchi said this was not true. This is, in fact, misinformation, the foreign minister said. You know, we have capability to produce missiles, but we have intentionally limited ourselves to below 2,000 kilometers of range because we don't want to be felt as a threat by anybody else in the world. Oh, right. That's why they're building and insisting on their right to build nuclear weapons. They don't want to be considered a threat. Of course they do. That's their whole reason for existence as a regime. Pressed on comments by Trump that he wanted to be involved in choosing Iran's next leader, Araghchi said Iran will allow nobody to interfere in our domestic affairs, least of all President Trump or the people of Iran. This is up to us to elect our new leader, he said. They have already elected the Assembly of Experts, and the Assembly of Experts will do the job. Trump said in a post Friday on Truth Social that the U.S. would not make a deal with Iran except, and he put in capital letters all of it, unconditional surrender. Asked on Meet the Press what the president meant, the UN ambassador Waltz, our UN ambassador, said he would leave that to the president as commander-in-chief to determine what that ultimately looks like. I think you can kind of imagine what unconditional surrender ultimately looks like. And the Iranians are not ready for that yet. See how many more weeks of destruction it requires. We're ahead of schedule, said the UN ambassador. And what the president ultimately wants is pretty much common sense. As he said, we have to have an Iranian government that no longer threatens the American people, threatens our allies, and threatens the world, and holds the world's energy supplies hostage through both its missiles and its navy. And speaking of holding the rest of the world hostage, there was a very important article in the Wall Street Journal today by Greg Ip, his Capital Account column, about the fears of stagflation and recession. In other words, devastating impact on the U.S. economy because of this war. And Greg Ip in the Wall Street Journal writes, it was an ugly week for the economy. All prices surged 39%, all but guaranteeing inflation is about to lurch higher. And it came amid emerging signs of job weakness as payrolls fell and unemployment rose in February. Those with long memories smell stagflation, a troubling mix of stagnant growth and stubborn inflation, or worse, recession. Higher oil prices helped sink the economy in 1973, 1980, 1990, and 2008. Odds are neither stagflation nor recession will happen, however. In other words, he says the odds are against those disasters. The economy has grown more resilient to oil shocks, and a productivity renaissance is underway, helped by artificial intelligence. Both will help sustain growth and cushion the pressures. In other words, the Wall Street Journal and their leading expert in foreseeing the future does not see horrible damage to the U.S. economy, despite what the markets may be saying or indicating at this difficult moment. We will get to more on this and the future of the war and any settlement for the war on this greatest nation on God's green earth coming up. And on the Michael Medved Show, there is a great deal of conversation about Russian involvement in the war and Russian help with intelligence, where Russia has obviously a far better developed international network of intelligence operatives than Iran ever did. Russia is a world power. Iran is it has ambitions to become a world power, but it isn't there yet, thank God. Concerning the Russian involvement and what that means, there were comments by the President of the United States and by the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who prefers to have himself designated as Secretary of War, and the White House press secretary, Christine Leavitt. And those comments concerning Russian involvement helping the Iranians sounded like this, beginning with Carolyn Leavitt. This is clip 16.
We don't comment on intelligence reports that are leaked to the press. Whether or not this happened, frankly, it does not really matter.
If they are, it's not helping much. You take a look at what's happened to Iran in the last week. If they're getting information, it's not helping them much.
What would it mean to you if they were? I mean, even if it's not helping the Iranians particularly much, it's still involving themselves in a conflict. They're not.
I guess they'd say we do it against them, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they say that? We do it against them?
The Russian involvement.
No one's putting us in danger. We're putting the other guys in danger.
Okay, why are they not willing to condemn Russia? It is bizarre. In other words, Russia, which is pummeling a righteous U.S. ally, which is fighting for its survival, called Ukraine, and that is still happening every day. Why is there such hesitance in condemning what Putin is doing in aiding Iran? Iraq is irrelevant right now. The President Trump on Air Force One actually echoed previous comments that he made, famous, in fact, notorious comments back in 2017. And what President Trump talked about in that conversation was in an interchange with Bill O'Reilly, where he was also extremely eager, it seemed, to excuse any outrages that the Russian regime, the evil empire, had performed. Listen.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you? Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world,
right?
Major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea.
He's a killer, though. Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
In other words, comparing the United States to the Russia of Lenin and Stalin. I mean, not to mention of Vladimir Putin. It was fairly extraordinary and an outrageous and very controversial comment when he made it. It seems that John Bolton, who was once upon a time the chief national security advisor to President Trump during his first term, John Bolton on News Nation had a different, it seems to me, more realistic point of view. This is clip 17.
Yeah, I think the most disturbing thing is the reporting yesterday that Russia has been supplying Iran with intelligence about the locations, the whereabouts of American ships, planes, bases, and so on, presumably to help the Iranians in their targeting. I hope that wakes everybody in Washington up to the role Russia is playing. It is an enemy of the United States. It's made that very clear, and this is just further proof of it. And I think we need to be on guard that we're not in the process of Russia trying to entrap us to stopping our military intelligence flows to the Ukrainian government in exchange for them stopping their intelligence to Iran. As I said earlier, with the retaliatory strike capability of Iran being dramatically reduced by the Pentagon's judgment, even if they had great intelligence on where our forces were, hopefully they no longer have the capacity to do much about it. So the intelligence Russia's providing, I hope, really is a meaningless exercise.
Let us hope so. But Eric Swalwell, who's a member of Congress, who right now is one of the 9, yes, there are 9 of them, 9 Democrats who are running for governor of California. Congressman Swalwell was on CNN and talked about the president's refusal to condemn what Russia is doing, helping the very dangerous to the whole world nightmare regime of Iran. This is Eric Swalwell on CNN.
It's a stunning 10-year record of failing to condemn Russia while U.S. troops are put in the way because he won't do it. But I also just have to say, Jim, I mean, that this is a long record that the president has now of saying he's going to do one thing and then he does the other. And people, frankly, in California, if you ask them what their top priority is, it's just to bring down the damn prices. They see a guy who said he'd lower costs on day one and he'd end wars on day one, and he's doing the exact opposite. And for someone to say he won the war already, and he said that today, again, if you just take account of what's happened, Americans are stranded in the region. There's no plan to get them back. Gas prices are spiking because the cost of oil has now gone up. We've lost American soldiers. He doesn't even have the respect, to honor them by taking off his hat. And his Secretary of Defense says it's insulting to put the soldiers on the front page. So there's a real cost here, and there's no plan as far as what comes next.
Okay, that's Eric Swalwell's position. President Trump himself, also aboard Air Force One. This is not yet the new Air Force One, the one that's provided as a gift from Qatar. But President Trump aboard Air Force One spoke about what he means by saying the only way to end this war is with Iran's unconditional surrender. This is clip 7.
Give us an idea of what unconditional surrender looks like to you. I mean, what do you want from Iran?
I said unconditional, not conditional. I said unconditional. It's where they cry uncle or where they can't fight any longer. There's nobody around to cry uncle. That could happen too, because we've wiped out their leadership numerous times already. So it's if they surrender or if there is nobody around to surrender, but they're rendered useless in terms of military.
Again, at least with the claims today from the new supreme leader and modest celebrations reported in Iran, the idea that they're ready to cry uncle, not yet. John Meacham, historian on MS Now, talked about the unique manner in which President Trump is handling the current war. This is clip 13.
Has any other administration handled war in this way?
No. There have been covert operations, but to launch this level of force with one level of rhetorical engagement, which is the president speaking entirely on his own terms and when he wants and with not a great deal of consultation, calling for an unconditional surrender from Iran. That's language that was first used by U.S. Grant in the Civil War and then was used at Casablanca by Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill.
Back in 1943. And the idea that we are treating this like an existential war, I'm not at all sure that demanding unconditional surrender makes it any more likely that that goal will be achieved, or any goal that puts an end to this war and helps the long-term security of the United States, this greatest nation on God's green earth.